Welcome everyone, I am Tock Custom and I'm in Chicago today with a good friend.
I'm Maggie from Paisley and Glue, and I am a theatrical costume maker and also a cosplayer.
Excellent. So thank you so much for having me today. And what are we going to be doing in this video?
We are going to be looking at a couple different smocking techniques and practicing how that may be used in various garment making and costume making.
Excellent. I'm very excited, so let's jump right into this.
Okay. So the first thing I wanted to point out is that there's two different kinds of smocking. This is called English smocking, and you're working this from the front on a piece of fabric that you've already pleated up evenly. And we're not actually going to be talking about this today. Today we're going to be talking about American or Canadian smocking. I've seen it both ways. And so this is worked from the backside, and it uses embroidery thread or regular thread from the back to pinch the fabric together to make these three-dimensional shapes. And there's a couple different kinds. This is called arrow smocking, and I think Tock is going to be doing an example of this today, and I'm going to be doing a slightly different one called the bones pattern. There's lots of different kinds of smocking, and we're excited to show you a couple different options of what you can use on your own project.
Okay, so Maggie has picked out two different fabrics as well as two different techniques of smocking. So which one are we going to be working on first?
So we are going to be doing the arrow smocking first.
Okay.
And I've chosen this polyester taffeta, which is of a similar color and weight to that very popular costume from Game of Thrones that Daenerys wears in season 5, 6, something like that, where she arrives finally in Westeros, and she's got that great texture and depth to her cape going down her back.
Excellent. So that was called arrow smocking, and I think a lot of people recently have been calling that dragon scaling with fabric.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's what we're going to show first, and I think we're going to do a little bit of a detailed explanation right now.
Yeah. So the first step is we are going to need to make a grid on our fabric. And how big your grid is really depends on how big you want your design to be. In this case, we are doing 1 by 1 inch squares. So we're just going to go ahead and draw a 1 by 1 inch grid across this whole panel. This is a 20 by 20 inch panel because we're interested in seeing how much the smocking shrinks our fabric up, which is important when you are doing your own project to make sure that you are cutting your pieces large enough after the smocking is finished. Okay, so we've scored our lines. So now we can take a look back at our chart that we've got, and we can start drawing our stitch lines. So we have our little cheat sheet graph here of how we need to draw our lines. So these are actually the stitch lines for the smocking that we need to draw onto our grid. So the first step, we're going to start up in this corner, and we're going to draw a line from that corner to that corner, and that corner to that corner, and that's our first arrow.
Then it looks like we skipped 2 boxes going to the left.
We skipped 2 boxes going this way.
And then same texture.
Same deal.
Okay.
And then if we jump down, we are going to draw another one in the next box going down in between those 2 V's.
Okay, so just kind of follow that pattern throughout the entire panel, and we should end up with our full texture throughout the entire thing.
So I'm going to let Tock finish filling in the rest of this graph, and I'm going to go ahead and move to my technique and go ahead and mark out my chart. Okay, so Tock is going to keep doing that. I'm going to transfer over to mine, and I'm doing the bones chart for mine, which is a little bit different of a final look. So I'm going to mark my grid. I'm using this kind of, it's like a polyester faux leather thing. It's pretty lightweight, so I think it's going to be kind of cool when we smock it up. So I'm working from the back side, and again, I'm going to mark a 1 by 1 grid, but I am just going to use this Sharpie to make a dot every inch.
So these are both 20 by 20 inch squares of fabric, so we're going to see how much we lose when we actually end up doing this technique.
So we're ready to stitch now. We definitely want to use a double thickness of thread or even quadruple. So I'm just going to knot this off at the bottom.
How much thread am I pulling
you don't
off?
want too much, about twice that, and then you're going to double that up.
Okay.
You don't want so much that's going to bunch up on itself.
Right.
I do like to use thread wax for this.
All right, so I have about 22 inches of doubled up thread that are going through a hand needle here.
You've got your...
Oh, should I thread wax?
I would do just a little bit, yeah.
I'm going to be honest and say I've never used thread wax before, so I'm imagining I just kind of loop my thread through here and kind of pull it semi-tight and then just slide this through there like that. I have done some leatherworking, so I'm familiar with putting beeswax on thread.
Yeah, it's the same.
So this will just let it slide through the fabric a little easier.
So now you're going to start at the top corner, and what you're going to do, you want me to demo one?
Yes, I would love for you to demo the first couple of stitches.
So we're going to start at the bottom
of the V.
Bottom of the first V in the corner. We're going to take a little bite out of the fabric there, going up. And I do that twice.
Okay.
And then these lines that you drew are telling you which way you're stitching. So we're going to move our needle up along that line, and then we're going to take a diagonal stitch through that corner at the end of that.
Okay.
And then you're just going to pull that tight.
Oh, so you're going to match those 2 points up perfectly the way you just did. Okay.
And then take 2 stitches through that.
Wow. So these are going to be real strong.
Yeah. And then you're going to do the same thing up the other leg of your V.
Okay.
It's a little weird here because we're right at our seam allowance.
Right.
And then this is where you need to kind of finagle this a little bit.
Oh, so it kind of...
Yeah, so it's...
I don't know if I should use the word pleats properly, but it is kind of making a
you're bringing
centerfold.
All those little corners in. And then I'll go through one going this way, and then the way that I do it is I'll do another one
going through all layers
through in this direction.
Wow. Okay.
So there's our first one, and then you're going to want to just stick a knot in that, but you don't need, got that little bunchy, but you don't need to cut that off. Some people do. It's not really necessary.
Is this the right side of the fabric?
This is the wrong side of the fabric.
Oh, good. Okay, that's important.
You're not going to see any of this.
Because I was like, this is going to look pretty rowdy.
So this fabric doesn't have a right or a wrong side.
Understood.
I marked mine on the wrong side because that does have a right or wrong side. So then we're just going to jump straight down. And we're going to do the same thing. And when you pull this, you can do this a couple different ways. You can either just leave this, pull it tight enough so that it's sort of flat, or you can pull it so it's got a little bit more tension.
So it'll add some depth.
It'll add some depth to your...
Okay, I might play around with that. But you know what? Well, you're doing it so it's got a little bit of a tension. I'm kind of curious to just let it lay flat like that.
Yeah.
Just because I think for me, being a newcomer to this technique, that'll be a little bit easier for me to stay consistent with that. So I'm going to do that and follow what you just did on this first knot here.
Okay.
And then, am I just going to go all the way down
all the
one
way
row?
Down, and then start at the top and then go all the way down. So you're just going to follow
so
all
just
the way.
keep doing that in rows. Okay, so I'm going to work on this, and Maggie's going to explain this other style of smocking on that.
So now I'm ready to start my side. So again, I'm going to start at the base of one of these lines that I've drawn and go straight up that line. I have a feeling that mine is going to stitch much faster than yours. I apologize.
That's okay. It's funny, I was thinking I should be paying attention to what you're doing, but then I realized I could just watch this video when it's done, and I will learn how to do both techniques at the same time.
So I've done this first stitch, now I'm going to jump down to this stitch and do the same thing. Again, I'm going to leave this flat.
What was the style of that smocking?
This is called bones, the bone pattern. kind of makes what looks like a femur. I haven't done this one before. We'll see.
Oh, okay. So this is a new thing for you.
This is a new thing.
Interesting.
And then I'm going to, so I've done that one and that one. I'm going to jump up to do this one and then this one and then continue. Okay, so I've done 2 sequences. Hop over to here and then keep going all the way across, and then I'll jump down and do the same thing on the next section.
Is that looking good?
Yeah, it's doing the thing. So it makes this like femur shape, but
okay.
It's like in a chevron.
Okay, cool.
There you go.
Nice. All right, so Maggie finished hers, so do you want to talk a little bit about how yours turned out?
I had about half as many stitches as I needed compared to Tock. So It did not take nearly as long for me to do this section. It did shrink quite a bit. So I'm from 20 inches square. It's looking like about a little bit more than 11 inches by about 13 and a half inches. So we lost, between... what is that, 40%?
Between 40 and 45% or so.
So that's pretty significant. So think about that when you are buying yardage, is that you're going to need to buy a lot more than you think you will.
This looks incredible. I love this texture. And then this is my first attempt at arrow smocking or dragon scaling. And mine isn't particularly as clean as I wanted it to be, but I am learning. And like she said, there's like twice as many stitches in this method of smocking, so it will take quite a bit longer. I will come back when this is all done, and we will kind of do a little wrap up and show you how these all look. All right, so last night Maggie and I finished doing our arrow smocking or dragon scale smocking, and both of these are done, and I think they both look excellent. I am extremely impressed with the one that you did. I really like this texture. And we did a little bit of math. So Maggie, if you want to pull up the numbers of how much material we lost by doing the smocking, I think that is really interesting.
So they both start out 20 by 20. You can see that the dragon scale shrinks a lot more than the bones pattern does.
Yep.
This ended up being 13 and a half by 11 inches. This one ended up being 11 and a half by 8 inches. So this one we lost about 60%. Between the height and the width. It goes a little bit more in on the width, and that's the same for the dragon scale. But the dragon scale lost more than 75% of the overall height and width. So
correct.
When you're calculating your yardages, make sure you do the math and figure out exactly how much fabric you're going to need, because it's going to be a lot more than you think. So we're going to just do a quick little look at how you would sort of finish off the edges of this and get it ready to sew. When you are looking at using smocking, it's a good thing to think about what project you're going to use. It's probably not going to be great for something that has a lot of seams and a lot of curved edges, but for cloaks and sort of rectangular pieces, this is a great choice.
So I'm imagining that you're probably going to use the pins you have pleated here to kind of do a stay stitch or a base stitch, and then we can just trim that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see how that looks.
Okay. So I've pinned the edges of this into some semblance of order, and I'm going to carefully stitch around. Chalk does not show up well on this, so I'm going to kind of eyeball my straight stitches. So bear with me, and then we're going to see how that turns out. Okay, we're done stitching the edge of this into place, and now we're going to go trim down our seam allowances. So I'm just going to eyeball a 1/2 inch seam allowance on this just to even out all of these edges.
All right, so Maggie's just cutting on the outside of her based or stay stitch there, so that if we were to sew this into a panel, those stitches would be hidden in that seam. All right, so it looks like we're all done with this demo, and I think this looks terrific. So at this point, what would you do with this panel of smocked fabric?
So something like this in a shape that either like this or bigger would be great for something, again, that requires a rectangular piece. It looks like this on the back, so you want to think about lining it if you would see the back of it, so keep that in mind. But this would be a great choice.
All right, so that's the end of our smocking demo, and I think these both turned out very well.
Yeah.
I'm very excited that this is the first time I've ever done smocking, so thank you to Maggie for teaching me. And you had some comments about the scale of the boxes on the back.
So it's always a good idea to do a small sample at least so that you can decide how big you want your grid to be is going to dictate how big your design is going to be. So depending on what you're doing and how long you want it to take, that can either get bigger or smaller depending on your project.
So you could do like a 2-inch square grid rather than a 1-inch square grid. And that would give you a different texture and a larger kind of pattern throughout your entire build there.
You can also use an iron to press, either do a hard press or do a soft press to compress the pattern a little bit.
Right.
Especially on the dragon scale, that's really popular to sort of smush that design down.
This one in particular has about 3/4 of an inch of depth, which is huge, could be a really good thing, but if you want more of a low profile flat finish, you can also press this as well. So there's a lot of variety and variation you can do with these. And also it's worth mentioning that there are, dozens if not hundreds of different patterns or techniques or styles of different smocking.
Okay, I hope that this helped you get some ideas about how you might want to use smocking in your own projects. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them below.
And this works great for both fashion design, certain sewing applications, and costume and cosplay. Thank you all so much for watching. Another big thank you to Maggie. I'm so happy that we got to do this.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you all so much for watching and all of your support, and we will see you in the next video.
Bye.
Perfect.
Great.
It's very rare I get a, one and done.
I don't know why outros are so awkward. I just, don't ever know.
Yeah, because it's like you're saying bye to someone, but they're not leaving. I don't know.
Right. Or they're in the process of clicking out.
Exactly.
You're talking and you're you don't actually care about that.
Are they going to watch it all the way to the last moment of this? I don't know. How satisfying is that?
It feels so nice.
It does. And it looks good.